You're listening to the Two Sleuth Podcast, all about the business of dentistry, hosted by yours truly, Greg Essenmacher, a fixed full arch dental expert and founder of GNA Consult, speaking with industry leaders on the dental landscape from their perspective. At GNA, we specialize in transforming full arch dental practices, teaching, coaching, and training teams to deliver an exceptional patient experience, from that first call to delivering final smiles. Whether you're a practice owner, a DSO executive, or a regional leader looking to expand your full arch program, boost same-store sales, or unlock the true profitability of full arch cases, we've got you covered. Ready to see how full arch can elevate your practice? Visit the show page or book a discovery call today. Let's turn your potential into results.
So it's interesting, Greg, because there is a handful of us in dentistry that have had the opportunity to work for dental companies. You mentioned Straumann, Neodent. I started at Brasseler. And in those organizations, procedural-based selling, procedural-based education, like you mentioned, spending time with these clinicians was just the fabric of those organizations. And so I look at, for example, somebody in today's world that might work for a software company that's, sells software, offers software to a dental practice, versus maybe those of us that got a chance to grow up in some of those companies. And I share this because I think it really, hits on the foundation that you had from a clinical side in regards to know, and for those, that are learning about GNA and can work with you, of that clinical foundation that you have and where it came from. So I want to go back just a little bit, because I think it's important to talk about that, to really establish that it's one thing to be a rep or a sales manager for a dental company based on what you do. It's a whole nother thing when you get a chance to work for an organization where, the procedures and all of that based on the product you sold, whether it was implants, or in my case, it was, the diamond burrs and all of that, where you had to understand the intricacies of the procedures. Like, we got this dental education that, looking back, I'm just so grateful for. So I'd love to just kind of get your thoughts on that bedrock of education that you got, which it sounds like then gave you the confidence to kind of where you are now.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up, because having that experience side by side in the operatory, especially in full arch, of being in over 1,000 procedures, right? Not an exaggeration. That is something that you can't overlook, because the subtleties and having that 360 view of a practice. And again, now this is from being on the manufacturing side. And the beauty of it is that watching and seeing the interaction and the interplay of so many different practices, literally hundreds of different practices, and how they perform the function. From the largest DSOs, like, Clear Choice at the time, which was the big one, right? Clear Choice being one of the earliest accounts that Neodent was able to acquire as part of our partners in 2014, to the GP practices that I shared, and being able to work with some of these GP practices that were adding full arch, or that had really started on their journey and were adding more practices to their portfolio, as we've seen more recently. Being able to see the differentiation of workflows, of how smooth and efficient they were, from analog to digital workflows. And I mention all this because the clinical aspect and that clinical education of hands-on, in addition to being in courses and the CE events from, some of these continuums that were, by the AAID, which were year long, or put on like the California Implant Institute, which was just a massively comprehensive organization and continuum, where I got to sat and digest just as the clinicians had. Some of the reps would step out of the room and go do whatever. Again, I was like a sponge and just absorbed all of this information, hundreds and hundreds of hours of classroom, lecture style, watching them do procedures in these courses, and then in clinic with our clients as we were converting clients over for a brand new product line to the US. That type of education was massive. But I want to fast forward that to the appreciation I have now as being an independent business owner, how much more I can relate to those clinicians who own practices, managing a P&L, their cost structure, how critically important it was, especially with the introduction of the operation side and the financial management side that has been brought in with my partner in crime, I call her Shar Watson, who really is, digests that and works with practices to be able to peel away their full arch P&L, to know their profitability and their break even point from the rest of their general dentistry practice. She has taught me so much in the last year alone on that side. The conversations and the understanding of the business side, it fills in so many gaps for me because now there is more connection with those clinicians of, I understand what you're going through. And it's not, I don't want to say it's not like the sales piece. It's more of the, I identify with the challenges you're going through, whether it's team development or marketing spend or operations and making the investment. So when I talk about making the investment, I know because I'm making investments all the time, whether it's in team members or technology, or when I talk about making your tech stack relate to each other and integrate into your practice. I know because I'm going through the same thing because we're evaluating what tech to use and what investments to make and what fill in the blank. And so when you have that parallel going on with your business and their business, maybe not the exact details, but at least the same thoughts and feelings and emotions, and that's where you really get to have those mindset conversations. It really is the education beyond the clinical, and you get into the business conversations and the relatability with clients. And I think that, John, is really where one of the big differentiation pieces are. That's that 360 view of the business of Full Arch. It's not the whack-a-mole, which is the treatment coordinator training, lead call training. How do you convert this? How do you look at the financials? Because I know for a fact that practices that we work with and emerging groups that we work with and DSOs, they don't necessarily have the opportunity to bring in a project manager to oversee the project of all the different pieces of the help that they need. And that's really the 360 view at GNA Consult that we bring in to be able to have that 360 view. And then we know when the flare up on the grill, if you will, right? You put some good meat on the grill where the flare up happens, we have the resources and the people that specialize in the areas to be able to handle that and know what's going to get the most ROI at any particular time during our engagement. And that's really where the value is.
Have you ever had anybody ask you, Greg, when they go to your website, when they're learning about GNA, they're learning about the work that you do, you're working with these, emerging DSO groups, and particularly on full arch and all of that. Do they ever say, "Are you a dentist?" Or, what is your experience behind that? Have you ever had that happen even once?
I have, and they do ask, and because I like humor, I usually say no, but I play one on TV. But I do, I share from my experience, and what I've learned, well, what I'm learning, John, right? I don't like to say that I've learned because I'm a continual student of life and of really staying present. Right,
Yeah.
just like for clinicians and clients that we work with, that the patients change, the market's constantly changing, especially in full arch, the market's changing. Look at a year and a half ago, and Nuvia was almost non-existent. Now they have 40 locations. If they're moving into your backyard, there's opportunity. So are you shifting and adjusting because the full arch market continues to expand? How much of that wedge are you getting? We like to talk about that. But
Yeah.
back to your question of like asking, am I a clinician? No, but I have been working with clinicians, and we do have clinicians that are advisors to the business so that we have that perspective. So if there is a clinician to clinician as far as workflow or where have you or those types of questions, we do have that, and I feel very close to. And I have friends that are good the clinicians. John, why would you ask that question? But I know from my experience that I can share from my experience, and frankly, we're not a good match for everyone, and that's okay. Because if we aren't, through our discovery process and conversations that we have, there are others that we certainly know who do similar, right? That do some of the specifics, some of the whack-a-mole, right? So maybe it's just they need a little bit of help in a treatment coordinator. They don't need the sum total. Or the one-to-one customized training that we do, maybe they don't need that specifically and they need more group training setting, which we have an option for that as well as we continue to grow and expand what we do for clients. That's why it's not a cookie cutter, one size fits all. We believe in formulas. We don't believe in scripts. We believe in customizing to a client, just like every single person who does full arch. Every single clinic is unique in and of itself because they have to differentiate. Just like we differentiate what we do from others in the same space that are doing kind of sort of something similar. But if you can't differentiate and identify who you are as a clinician, as a consultant, as how you can help and identify, here's some of your pain points, here's some options of what have worked best for others. Because it really is about bringing best practices, not theories, and then good luck implementing. Because if you don't have the solutions that you can help to implement, then you're just telling people what to do. And trust me, I don't like people to tell me what to do, so I certainly don't like to tell people what to do if we can't walk alongside them and help them with the solution.
Well, I wanted to ask you that question because back in 2012, I had the opportunity to work for Mortensen Dental Partners, which is here in Louisville, Kentucky. And I'll never forget Dr. Wayne Mortensen, the founder,
Mhm.
amazing man, amazing clinician, loved by so many. But he made this decision to bring somebody who had been in dentistry, but had also been on the sales side to kind of give a different set of eyes to his practice. And so the only reason I really wanted to ask you about the questions that you get on the website in regards to you being a dentist, it's very apparent. I mean, if you just go and look at the work that you've currently done, and for those that you've been working with, those dentists, and have them share what the experience has been like, that it's very clear that they understand that you know this business, you understand the inner workings of the things that you're helping them with. And let's call it like it is, Greg, right? Like that different perspective at times can really mean the difference between having a dentist and a practice owner and or emerging DSO make the decision to take that leap versus not doing anything at all. And I feel like, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this, in the last 3 to 5 years in dentistry, I feel like there has just been this barrage of new things, new technology, new information, new software, knowledge everywhere, the explosion of the internet. Yet it's like we're moving towards this part of the industry where it's time for implementation, meaning like we've all learned that there's all this stuff out there. And I'm curious on your thoughts, for the dental teams that you work with. Do you feel like there's a lot of them that just want to be, and I say this professionally, be guided and or be told by individuals like yourself, like, listen, like we've been on the fence about this stuff, but we feel like we need people like you to push us over the edge to get to that next level. And they're now a little bit more comfortable with admitting that. Whereas in the past, as you know, Greg, maybe not so much.
It's the accountability piece, right? Hold us accountable. They want to be held accountable for the most part, not all of them. And a good friend of mine in the industry, Chelsea Meyer, said, there's some people who are just, she equates it to some that are in a deep sleep. They don't want to be woken up, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. But for the most part, many of them crave it. And it's not the let's go to a course, let's go and learn some information, and then there's no follow through. There's no implementation, there's no accountability on the back end. Because I'll tell you, John, there's a lot of clients that we start working with that will go in and they'll be like, yeah, we've heard that. We've learned that before. Okay, but you aren't implementing it, right? The results aren't coming through because no one's holding you accountable to, well, we have trackers for that. Okay, so show me. And we'll ask simple questions like, in the last 3 months, how many arches did you do in that month, and that month? Great. Where did they come from? Was it an internal referral? Did it come from your website or did it come from X, Y, or Z direct to consumer marketing? Show me specifically, not tell me. And so many times we'll get like a lead clinician and we'll get somebody from operations on that initial discovery call, and they won't be aligned on what those numbers are, let alone be able to show. But we have implant trackers. We have trackers all over the place. We have this tracker and this tracker and this tracker. Yet that simple question can't be answered. So I offer up to anybody who's watching, listening, that is a simple way. If you cannot say and show with your top individuals in leadership in your group, in your practice, wherever you are, if you can't answer those simple questions and show in documentation instantly when somebody asks, then you are not aligned and you are not implementing some very, very simple basics in full arch, and you really don't know what your ROI is. And I know it sounds very aggressive and challenging, but that is so basic that that's really where you have to start. And then building on top of that with so many other metrics. And we usually start with 3 or 4 KPIs that we can start to track instantly to show that return on investment in 45 to 60 days. It is so apparent. And I like to say there's hidden arches. There's hidden arches hiding. If you've been doing any type of marketing to any significant amount in the last 3 to 6 months, you have hidden arches sitting in your pipeline. They're just sitting there. And some of those tracking of those metrics between conversion of lead calls and then conversion of those consultations and the follow-up, it's very, very basic, but it's a collaboration. I don't have any magic pixie dust, right? That's not the way it works. But if you're willing to work with and work with our team and your team is on board, and we help with that too, the messaging to them, that's where we see that significant uplift. And it's really exciting to see people wake up and get excited about. And that's where we also align the teams so that they actually, and we're not, when I was going to say, and that's where we help them to compensate as well, but we're not talking about giving away the farm. It's alignment with profitability as well, because anybody who's watching or listening to this should know, right? Those first 2 to 3 arches in a month, the profitability and margin is not anywhere close to number 4, 5, 6, and 7. And if you're doing 8 or 10 arches a month, you know full well that you may have been more profitable with arches 4 and 5 than you were with 12 to 15. And looking at that profitability, John, is so critically important to know how profitable with which numbers, because a lot of times you just add overhead or you add complications to the system. And it's not like the Billy Idol song, right? Rebel yell, more, 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 because that's not how you necessarily get to better or to scale. But if you do it in a measured way, we call it our stages of development, and know at what point that you add another team member into that micro team if it's a part of a GP practice and you have other parts of the practice. Shifting profitability from one side to the other, the general dentistry side to the full arch side, that doesn't net gain anything. And if you're gonna start to add to, you need to understand the dips and how you actually scale. And that's what we really help with. And that's really what all of this is about. It's about teaching and coaching and training, but it's also visibility to the numbers and profitability so that it's scalable and you understand when to add and sometimes when to hold, because 1 month is just 1 month. 3 months, now that tends to be a trend that you have some systems and processes in place, which we help to put into place. That's where you build and grow off of. And that's where you can start to make some sustainable changes. That's what we help to do at GNA Consult.
All right, I want to go back a little bit to the early days of GNA. As a matter of fact, I want to go back even a little bit before that and tap into kind of your thought process. You mentioned that there was some around you that had encouraged you based on your experience and your curiosity to kind of start this thing.
Yeah.
But was there a moment, Greg? Was there, for all entrepreneurs, most of us, there's a moment, right, where we were kind of like thinking, and then all of a sudden that thinking turned into action, turned into you wake up and 6 months later you've got a company and you're doing all this stuff and you're like, what the heck did I do? Was there a moment with GNA where based on kind of the insight you had got from others, where you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, and do you remember that, and what was it like?
Yeah, so my story's a little bit different. So I actually started on the books and incorporated GNA Consult back in 2015. And so that was my first stint. I had my first stint with Neodent, and then 2015 I started GNA Consult. And I'll be completely frank with you, John, I wasn't ready. Made some business deals, and I wasn't ready to make the right deals and didn't really know fully what I was doing, and cost me some time. And well, it didn't cost me much, right? It was a learning opportunity. Let's call it that. And then actually went and worked for Neodent again, a second time around, and really gained the experience and knowledge that I needed to. So the relaunch that I did in 2020, that's really where I started to gain the footing in 21. And so it wasn't necessarily a one point there, but I can tell you a story that really made a huge difference for me. And that was in 2022, and it was at the DICOMA conference. And pretty much everybody knows the DICOMA conference. If you don't, it is the biggest DSO conference out there, and I love it. It's in Denver every year. And I remember because I made an intentional strategy when I relaunched the brand that there was a couple of things that I committed to, that I would be true to myself and authentic. And I would be of service minded to other companies. And as I met industry partners, how can I be of service to you? How can I help build and grow your brand? Because I knew eventually it would help build and grow GNA Consult. And so I did that, and I did it through social media. I did it through LinkedIn, Instagram, a little bit on Facebook. Now I'm more active on Facebook, and now YouTube as well. But I was really had that service mindset because I didn't invest in any dollars in marketing to help build and grow my company. And it was at the Dykema conference in 2022, and I was walking what I call the gauntlet, right? It's a big long hallway, vendors on both sides. And John, I couldn't get down that hallway without people stopping me and saying, and like, hey, Greg, it's good to see you. And I have to be honest, about half the people that stopped me, I didn't recognize. Maybe it's because the Photoshop of their faces on LinkedIn. I don't know what it was. But once I finished walking that gauntlet, there was just this moment of like awareness and knowing, like, huh, I think this is really going to stick. I really have like a company. And at that point, I had hired an executive assistant. They had a couple of 1099s working for me. And I thought, this thing's a go. This is really happening. And that was really the moment that I think you're describing. It wasn't as early on with the relaunch of GNA Consult, or this time around, I should say. But that was a moment, which is, it sticks in my mind. And it really was that moment for me when I knew there was something there, as we learned from some politics that remember the tongue in cheek from the early '90s or the mid '90s. So yeah, it was a great moment, and still to this day you can see the smile and the beam on my face because it reminds me of the encouragement that I got from
Yeah.
others, and conversations that I've had with others, and I'm so thankful for others who have encouraged me along the way and continue to. And I have that servant leadership mindset. I should say, I try to, right? I do my best. I don't always, but as much as I can, try to maintain that servant leadership mindset in everything that I do. If you need help with converting lead calls into consultations, closing consults into more full arch cases, or creating a more strategic marketing message and branding for your practice or group, follow me for more tips or reach out to GNA Consult for a discovery call today.